edition of the Heat Treat Podcast. Today we have a power player of the industry, super energetic Tom Morrison, CEO of the MTI, the Metal Treating Institute. So if somebody knows heat treaters, he is the guy. How's it going, Tom?
Carlos, I am so excited to be here today. I know I've known you now for what, a decade? I mean, you came to the Yes Management Training Program. You come to all of our national meetings. You bring us the Mexico flavor to our national meetings, which is exciting. So always good to be, and I'm glad to be here on this show to speak to your audience.
Thank you so much, Tom, for being in the podcast. Today, we're going to talk about the biggest challenges of the heat treat community. Tom works with a bunch of heat treaters, managing the Metal Treating Institute. He's going to tell us a little bit about it in a second. But he's been talking to many of the guys, many of the presidents, many of the director, VPs. So he knows where the industry is going, what are the challenges from heads of companies, right? So I don't think we can have a better guest than you to talk about this subject, because you get such a wide, audience and idea sharing from talking to this type of people, suppliers, heat treater, other companies, and you know where the industry is going, because actually that's your job. Right. To see where the heat treat industry is going, right?
Exactly.
So before we start, today we're going to talk about the challenges of the heat treat industry, right? Labor shortage, rising cost, chain of the supply. We're going to talk about, of course, about automation. But if you could give us an introduction of the Metal Treating Institute, what it does, what it's meant to, and a little bit of your background as the CEO of the Metal Treating Institute.
So I've been here for 15 years. I came here in 2005 under the previous CEO, Lance Miller, who was here for 31 years, phenomenal guy. And I took over in 2008 when he retired. And MTI has just been a great ride. It's got a board of 19 people. It's your nonprofit trade group. We represent 97% of our companies are represented in the United States and Canada. And then we have a category of 3% that's in Mexico, Europe, Asia, all around the world. So an MTI is it's an innovative trade group that really seeks to look out and have business benefits that really benefit the member out there. We have our technical standards committee. A lot of our members are CQI9 in the automotive and NADCAP in the aerospace world. And then ASTM really impacts everybody. And we have a technical standards committee that really is looking in all these different committee meetings to bring the information that people need to be successful and have their equipment changes in their quality departments on an ongoing basis. So we're unveiling all the things that are coming out. Because here's the thing, Carlos, the first time you hear about a change going on with your hardness testing or your vacuum or aerospace or automotive is when it happens. It's imperative that you are part of a trade group that's in those meetings, influencing them to where they're not onerous and overburdened. And MTI does that for all of our heat treaters. And then we have things like financial benchmarking. Right now, besides a labor shortage, the number 2 concern with most business owners is uncertainty of the future. And we're connected with some very good financial forecasting partners who forecast the future for us out 1, 2, and 3 years. And it really takes away a lot of the uncertainty from our members. And then we have probably the world's best technical and managerial training online platform out there teaching. Here's the thing, in the labor shortage, there's very few people to hire coming in. So what's the next thing? You can't afford to lose anybody you have because there's no one to replace them with. And what we've learned, at least in the States, I don't know if this is true in Mexico, you can maybe help me speak to that, but in America, people aren't leaving their job. They're not leaving their companies. They're leaving their boss. So one of the number 1 things that companies are having to go through right now is teaching their managers really how to be coaches, not dictatorial managers or bosses, people that understand their employees, can get the most out of them and stuff. So we have a great 12-module series that takes about a week to go through that people can buy into to help their managers really understand how to manage people so people want to come to a dynamic work environment. So we have a series of 10 different industry support team partners in HR, cybersecurity, metallurgy, all kinds of things, safety. The key things that help a heat treat plant be successful, we have industry partners that help them be successful in those areas. So we represent the corporate side of heat treating, and the people that we really serve are the business owners and key executives and the plant managers to really help their plants run efficient, profitable, and with productivity like none other. So that's who we are. We've been doing it. I think we got a very innovative board of directors, this whole automation thing about the future, about what can we do in the future.
And I've been a member of the MTI, and I can say that it's an institute that actually brings you value, a lot of value. So I will encourage anybody. Tom does a great a great role leading it and coordinating it. They actually are the ones that coordinate one of the shows in the States. It's FNA, right, for the North America. A great show. It's been postponed because of COVID. But as Tom said, the NTI is an institute, right, that it's all about heat treatment or centrality, labor shortage, benchmarking, trends, new markets. So it's very worth it. So let's go into the topic of today's podcast. Before we start recording, Tom can talk for many hours. We can have just a channel for Tom Morrison opinions, but because he actually knows a bunch of stuff. But we're gonna try to keep it short.
My wife would agree with that statement.
So Tom, what do you think today are the biggest challenges for the heat treat industry or the heat treat commercial shops nowadays? I don't know. You want to talk about captive? I know that you mostly do with commercials, but what are the challenges for owners of commercial heat treat shops right now?
Well, we've got about 20 captive members, which Boeing's a member, FedEx is a member because they do a bunch of heat treating, they do the training through us. So we have a number of captives that we've spoken to as well. And it doesn't matter what industry you're in, what piece of the supply chain you're in, the number one thing that, and the problems facing heat treaters today are not heat treat related. Our members and other heat treaters out there heat treat awesome. They heat treat for every Fortune 500 company, every process, every piece of material. But where everybody is suffering is people. Everywhere I go, I say, what's your number one challenge? And they'll say, hiring good people, finding good people. And so it's imperative that your company is beginning to have the conversation around, because the demographics show that this problem we have is going to be here till at least 2030. I've been in meetings before where I've asked people, Carlos, I said, look at the last 12 months and ask yourself, tell me the answer to this. How many times have you had someone that is teachable, trainable, decent resume with a good work ethic and was hireable? How many of those people have walked through your door in the last 12 months? And everybody says, Tom, that's a unicorn, because they don't exist. We might have one in a year, but you used to you had a flow of people that were qualified walking in, but the demographics of society, just because of birth rates and stuff, we don't have that qualifications, at least in the United States. And a lot of other countries are suffering that as well. And, COVID really disrupted that entire thing, because now, at least in the States, with the advent that you got a fair amount of weekly support from the government, there's a whole bunch of people that aren't coming back into the workforce because they're making more money hourly from the government than they are with the payouts than they are through what they'd make if they went to work. But now that's starting to end. So it's going to be interesting the next 12 months to see how the unemployment numbers and the employment numbers play out as people come off of government assistance and get back into the job flow. But for the next 10 years to 2030, we got some real challenges. Now here's the positive side. In the US at least, we're staged because of how we're positioned demographically, because of our younger generation is the largest generation in our history. Our economists are telling us that we're positioned for the biggest economic uptick in our history for the next 9 to 10 years. But the question is, if you don't have enough employees to push the output, how do you take advantage of that? And that's where the balance is going to come the next 10 years. Anybody that can figure out how to get the work done differently without a lot of manual labor are going to be the ones that win the day for the coming years in this labor shortage.
There's still to be some manufacturing and some labor on any company, right? Of course, everybody wants to automate stuff. Everybody wants to hire, use more technology, hire less people. But it gets to a certain point that you still have to have managers. You still have to have some people that are doing some kind of manual work. Going to heat treat, right? There's a bunch of application on heat treat, and there's a bunch of companies that help you automate your line. But there's a bunch of stuff that is still like loading the baskets or loading the trays that has to be done manually, right? Transfer it, you have to have, forklifts operators, you have to have metallurgical engineers, so what do you think is going to be that balance? Because automation is also very expensive. Of course, it can give you a ROI back in some years, right? But, not all commercial shops have the amount of money to invest to fully automate their line.
Well, it is a challenge for heat treaters, because if you're a heat treater that has the same furnace, the same part, always going through,
that's a captive.
You can automate that line in a heartbeat. But in a heat treat shop, you've got one part, this triangle that's coming in, and like 30 minutes later, you've got a circle part coming in that's much bigger. So how do you automate that process? And that's the real conversation being gone through right now. But here's the thing though, Carlos, automation is not always about loading the fixturing and loading in the furnace. It's about information flow, processes, operations. How do you create the least amount of waste in your operation when you do your work? And I always go back to this great visual in the movie called The Founder. It was a US-based movie called The Founder about the guy that started McDonald's, Ray Kroc.
Great movie, by the way.
Yeah, and so one of the scenes in there is he's on a tennis court with 6 people, and he draws up a square, and he puts the fry stand over here, the Coke stand over there, the hamburger stand over there, and the order, and they simulate. He draws it all out, and he simulates it until no one runs into anybody to get the order under 3 minutes or 3.5 minutes. And you would see him. He would say, "Stop." 2 people would run into each other. He would say, "Stop," and he would redraw where all the stations were until one moment he goes, "That's it. We got the order through in 3.5 minutes without touching anybody." And that's what they ran with in terms of their operations. And that's what heat treaters have to do in this community, is look at their operations for when the part hits the loading dock and it comes in, and then it goes out through the processes and goes to the other side to shipping to go back. The ones that are going to win are the ones that figure out how to do that with the least amount of human touch. Now, I'm with you. You're always going to need manual human labor, but the people that can figure out how to automate as much of the human labor as possible are going to be the ones that win. And it's not about getting rid of people. I tell people it's not about removing people. It's called capacity expansion. Think about it, if we have no more labor to really hire in mass the next 10 years, if you want to grow your business 5% a year, my question is, how do you grow your business 50% the next 10 years with maybe hiring 10% more people? Until you start asking that question and trying to figure, if you just ignore the question, you'll never seem to figure it out. But if you start asking the question and go to your fixturing department, or go to one of your departments and say, "You know what? I want you guys to think of something. If I were to come in and tell you that we just got the largest order and it's going to double your production in the next 2 weeks, in 2 weeks, your production is going to double. Can you handle that?" And most people are going to go, "No, we cannot." Then come back to me with an automated procedure that can help us do that effectively without stressing everybody out. And that's how you start to have those conversations. Because I'm telling you, if we refuse to have those conversations, and our fall meeting in San Antonio that you spoke about earlier, we have a special speaker coming in who's going to talk about the data behind the shortage of labor to get everybody's mind open and say, okay, now we need to talk about automation, talk about it differently. And then he's going to lead a panel discussion of 2 people that have automated some processes in heat treating in a commercial shop.
Now, go ahead.
I just going to say they're going to help members kind of open their eyes to the possibilities of automation in different areas.
Yeah, I just wanted to add to that, because I also work in many heat treat shops, and I visit a bunch of captives and commercials, and I'm totally for all up for automation and integration and Industry 4.0. But I just want to be on the realistic side. Furnaces and the loads that we actually handle, they're heavy. We have to deal with a variable that is distortion, that automation doesn't handle really well. Robotics don't handle distortion really well because they have very, 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 very tight tolerance, right?
Right.
And like you were speaking about Ray Kroc, that movie, when you can change layouts, changing a layout on an existing commercial heat treat shop, it's very intensive on work, time, and of course, furnaces are bottlenecks, right? So it's not like you can shut down a furnace, switch it around really quickly and install it back and get it back to run. And sometimes the customers or the normativity like CQ9 and things like that, they call you. If there's a major movement or fix or maintenance on the furnace, you have to pip up it again, right? So we have the industry by nature gives us really, really low flexibility to try new changes, right? You see other lightweight or light industries that they just can't play with their layout all of the time because it's very light, operations are very light. But for us to be switching around furnaces or trying to innovate, it's a bigger challenge. Not impossible, right? But it's most time-consuming, more cost-effective than other companies, especially for distortion. One of the biggest things, more labor-intensive, that it's and I don't want to be rude here. It's a little more unskilled, right, is doing a constant movement, right?
Yep.
That can be done by a robot. But when you have distortion, taking apart and putting it on a rack, right? If it's not if they don't have millimetrical tolerances, you're gonna get it right. So that's why you always need a guy doing the same operation, right? So that I'm 100% with you. I just will let the guys that figure out how to do this, right, are going to be the winners to implement technology, ERPs, barcodes, scans.
Yep.
But I believe we have the challenge against other industries that we cannot implement robotics with a variety of parts, flexibility, like you just said, a square part versus a round part, and then you got a stored tray on a different furnace. So that's my opinion. I don't know if you have a comment on that.
No, I mean, no question that some of the sheer size of some of the pieces, the differing of different parts going on a tray to go into a furnace are going to create challenges. But I just know in every industry, there's the vast majority of people are not even at least having the beginning conversation, because even if you could automate 30% of your processes, think of the profits and productivity and efficiencies that would come from that. So I think when people hear automation, they think of their entire operation. They're thinking about the worst case scenario. We can't automate that. Well, forget that. That's always going to have 3 guys picking up the big wheel and sticking it on the forklift to get it over there to get it in the furnace. That's always going to happen. You're never going to automate that. But there could be 20 to 30% of your overall, because here, think about this. Industry 4.0 is about 4 things. It's about blending and connecting people, machines, data, technology, and process. So a lot of people will look at the machine part and say, we can't automate that machine because it's too large. But could you put some kind of technology, sensors or probes or something in place that would take you from needing 3 people doing that operation down to 1?
That's a huge win. That's a huge win.
Everybody thinks automation is about removing the people from the process.
And I believe you just hit the nail. You know, everybody, because of the era we're living, thinks that automation is like having a lights out facility. It is not, like you're saying. Yeah. You know, I think that's the right approach for heat treaters.
Yeah, and you look at technology and process and data. I know a lot of people that I've seen some, and this is in any industry. I've seen operations that still don't have a technology. Their ERP systems is not on the web. They can't access stuff through an app. You know, and if you're going to make it, I think in the next 10 years, you're going to need to go digital with everything that you have, where you can access it. Because if I'm a person that has to go from this side of the shop 100 yards to the other side of the shop to get anything as far as information on a piece of equipment or a product, then that's waste. And how can you bring that information right to them within 3 feet of them, wherever they're standing, with iPads or phones? So
I got a question, because you're very involved into this. But if you could tell us an average, because you talk to many presidents or owners of commercial heat treats. How many of them were able to handle working from home, you know, and how many took, well, in a percentage on average, or how many say, you know, we cannot do this from home. We have to be, we cannot work remotely a commercial shop. We have to be on the shop. Do you have some numbers on that? Or,
you know, it's hard to have numbers because it's all over the place. I mean,
but not numbers, but opinions. You know, because I have talked to both of the sides. Like, no, you cannot work from home on a heat treat shop. I mean, you have to be there. There's that approach, and there's the other approach of the other owner, which is totally fine. That we're trying to do as much remote work as possible, and we have a skeleton crew in the shop. Did you got any feedback from your contacts?
Oh yeah, that's what I'm saying. It's all, we got some, you just described everything that we have. So we have some that it's because they want to be there is why they're there. But I mean, there are some owners that says, you know what, I got everything on my phone. I've got qualified management. They took all their admin staff, accounting and others and let them work from home remotely. So tomorrow's workplace is going to be a fine blend of remote versus in office. And I don't think, just like automation, I don't think that's an either or. I think it's a blend, because here's the thing. There is something that comes from 2 people coming into the office and sharing together and talking. There's an energy there. There's a chemistry that happens that you don't get doing remote. But then I do know that, like here at MTI, we work Monday, Tuesday, Thursdays from the office, and Wednesday, Fridays from home. Because when you're working remotely, you can really channel in on what I need to get done in minutes. I can't get done in the office because I'm always got phone calls and stuff. So I think any operation is going to have a fine blend to get the most efficient workplace that they can.
Fantastic.
That's no different from presidents. Presidents, I mean, when I've done virtual calls with presidents, they were doing them from their home.
Yeah.
They weren't doing them from their office. So I think presidents are at home knocking stuff out, as well as going in the office to check in and see how things are running.
Thanks for that feedback. I think that's very valuable because there's always the two approach. I have heard it, the two sides of the coin. That COVID made a lot of people go faster, speed the automation or their processes up, right? And the companies that were ready with the processes, they were more successful in doing that. But the others that were not so prepared, that forced them to make that happen, right?
Well, here's what COVID did. COVID exposed the weaknesses in everything, and it accelerated the process. So just like we say, we can't automate that in a heat treat plant because of this, this, and this. Well, guess what? About 2 years ago, there was a ton of people saying you could not have my entire office, other than the line workers, my entire office could not work remotely at home and we'd be effective. Well, guess what COVID did? COVID proved that you could. So now you got a lot of owners that weren't ever thinking about their accounts receivable person working at home. Now they've let them work from home full time because, hey, they're a much happier person and they're actually getting all the work done as well. So COVID forced us to think differently about things that we thought could never happen, and we proved that it could happen.
I do, and this is my personal opinion. I do believe that have some office time is always good because of the interaction. You build team building with you communicate better. There's a better sense of urgency that if you're sending emails back and forth. I do like your stand on that, like the hybrid. You work from home, you have to hit the office every other day. Because I believe that we'll get the benefits of both sides of the coin. Now, going back to the second challenge of the heat treat, you mentioned rising costs. Okay, first one is labor shortage. 100% with you, right? Labor and talent shortage. That's how I will describe the other one. But rising cost. Can you go a little deeper on that?
Well, rising costs circle around raw materials that you're having to buy. Raw materials are going up everywhere. Labor costs are going up. So guess what? People have to raise their labor rates to be able to hire people at a good rate. They're paying bonuses you never thought, signing bonuses you never thought. So their cost of doing business is going up. So everybody's raising their rates all the way up the supply chain. I was just talking to someone today who bought gas back in January for $6, a unit, and she said, "Tom, now it's $10 a unit." It went up. It's 80% in 8 months since January to today. So everything that's impacting a heat treater, a lot of the costs are beginning to rise, and it's a super big challenge because your customer. I mean, you go to Boeing or any of these, especially Fortune 500 companies. They don't want to see you rising their costs 3 to 4%. So I know a lot of people back in the recession and when Katrina hit and it caused gas to go way up in the States from the hurricane, then you start looking at transportation surcharges and energy surcharges and environmental surcharges. So that's one way people kind of help raise costs. That way they can say our stuff is 5 cents a pound, but there's a 3% energy surcharge on it just to take ownership of that gas price increase. So the question is do those come off when times get good? So, but I mean, I'm hearing a lot from heat treaters that they're just seeing costs rising up over time, just because everything in the supply chain, with no labor, is causing costs to go up.
And I know that you also are very good with economics. MTI is always having speakers great speakers for, talking about economics. But because this is an economics problem, right? The rising of the cost is not very technical heat treat wise, but it's a situation that energetics, because the bigger cost of heat treats, labor. We talked about that one. Labor is going up. Energetics, it's also going up. We use a lot of gas. We use a lot of energy. So that's second. Metals, steel is going up like crazy. Yeah. Alloy is going up like crazy. I don't know if quench oil or quenching medium is going up. I would assume yes, right? And things are getting slower to get. The supply chain is very slow. Everybody in the world is having delays on raw materials or delays on purchases or on supplies, right? Which will be like the third challenge right now. change of the supply chain. We were we still are a very global economy worldwide, right? Mm-hmm. But right now, with this happening, everything that is going on the Chinese ports, with the Suez Canal, with travel restrictions, with COVID, the world took or is taking a different approach on the supply chain, right? And you know this stuff. What do you think is happening right now? And where do you think it's going to go? Is everything's going to be more closely manufactured? I mean, there's going to be supply chain bubbles, right? Or are we going to still do all this crazy, farming in Argentina, assembling in Taiwan, and selling it back to the States? What do you think is going to happen with the supply chain restrictions that we're having right now?
Supply chain restrictions, in my opinion, boil down to people. Because we have a people shortage and a lack of people in every country to do all the work that needs to be done, because some of them have shut down, some of them still only have essential businesses open. That's and we've gotten in. When I go in a grocery store here in the United States, or going to a Walmart or a Target, and you see some shelves are empty. Well, used to those shelves were never empty because they pre-bought and pre-manufactured 2 months worth of inventory because they knew what was coming. Well, that doesn't happen nowadays. Most everybody is doing inventory on a just needed basis. And when I talk to many of the heat treaters, we just sent out a survey this week asking the heat treaters, describe your flow of sales. Is it up and down, like a zigzag? One month is really high, the next month is slow, and then all of a sudden the customer said, hey, we need this tomorrow, and it went high again? Or is it consistent? Or is it all over the place? And most people, sales are all over the place because their customers are ordering. Usually the customer ordered in a very predictable manner. Not anymore. It's a very sporadic manner that they're ordering, which is so tough to manage. And most of that boils down to that the supply chain has serious kinks because every country that feeds the supply chain is having different versions of COVID in terms of how different governments are reacting to it differently. People are locking down at different levels. The United States is fairly open right now in most states, and they're pushing, and people are working hard and stuff, but you got some countries that are in the supply chain that are, on total lockdown for a large degree. So how do you get the car parts in that country out fast enough to keep? I mean, you look at the chip shortage. Mm-hmm. I mean, that's a big thing. We never had a chip shortage before. Now we have. I mean, you look at the toilet paper shortage we have, and that scared the hell out of everybody.
Well, the toilet paper is easier to replace than chips, right?
I agree. But it's still it boils down to, I guarantee this, if there was enough people in the supply chain to do the work, the supply chain would fix itself. And that's the challenge, is you don't know what unit you have enough people to do the work. And if you're step 3 in a 5-step supply chain process, and step 3 doesn't have enough people to push the work through, that's where the bottleneck happens. If that step 3 had enough people, then you could push it on out and get it. That's the number one thing that's going to plague every part of the supply chain and customer base in the next 5 to 10 years, is they could grow. I talked to a person in construction that said, Tom, we could build 20% more houses if we just had the people. And I know there are heat treaters listening to this right now that are saying, Tom's exactly right. If we had 5 more people, we could push out 20% more work, but you can't find them. And that's the biggest challenge for everybody, is trying to find. Everybody that you want to come work for you right now is currently working or sitting on the sideline. There's not a whole lot of people actively looking for work. And we've had some podcasts from a labor economist who's going to be speaking at our conference in October, who says just that. That you don't have anybody, you don't have this large group of people looking for work. You have people working, and you have people sitting on the sideline waiting for something to happen to maybe get interested in working. And some point in time, where our hope is that those people all of a sudden say, you know what, I got to go back to work.
So the common sense to face that project will be, to face that problem will be, automate as much as you can, mm-hmm. And the employees that you already have, you have to make them A players, very diverse. There's also the term that it's very cliche right now. That is generalist versus specialist.
Yeah,
I don't know. You heard the whole keynote, right? Mm-hmm. Now, heat treat is it's a special process, especially when you talk about carburizings or nitridings or LPC. That's described as a special process because there's a lot of core competence that you need to have. But now if you have a metallurgical engineer that does carbon testings or case depth testing, something like that, he has to be able to perform other activities that are not just on the special side. He has to be able to manage quality, to manage the ERP system, the software, watch utilization. So if you have specialists on your company, you have to have the guy keep up what he's doing, automate as much as of the special work, but to help out and aid on the general side, right? So the people that you have, the staff, you have to make them to use all the resources and abilities on the shop, because you have to hire and train the guys, but you have to be able to retain them. But you have to make them work, not on the special side, but on the general side of the company. So automate, you have to make the people the best of what you can. And what would be another common sense about do you think that we have to? I think we have to make our industry more modern. I don't want to say that, we're dealing with the millennials right now, and they want to go and work to these fancy tech industries. Everybody wants to be an entrepreneur right now. My personal opinion, that's overrated. I mean, there's a bunch of great companies to work for, and I don't think we're doing a great job advertising how passionate the heat industry is right now. I don't know if you have an opinion on that.
Well, even back in the 50s and 60s, my generation, I'm the last baby boomer out there. When I say see you gone, I'm out. I'm the last one. So even in my generation, we wanted to be an executive someplace at some time. We didn't want to work in the plants necessarily, but we did, and so.
That's my point, right? Back in the days, in your days, everybody wanted to be an executive. Right now, everybody wants to be a Mark Zuckerberg, or not an executive, like a tech entrepreneur, right? That's right. Being an executive right now is not very fashionable.
But here's the thing: back then, you could only get what you were qualified for, and the same still holds true today. If you're somebody that is not willing to go out and get the proper education and the proper skill sets to get paid those rates and do it with excellence, you're not going to be the Mark Zuckerbergs of the world. So many, and it's not a bad thing. I mean, we need people working in fast food. We need people working in manufacturing plants. And here's the thing: people working in heat treat plants make good money. I mean, I've seen people.
They do.
When just in any industry, when you start here at the bottom, you're stepping in. That's not where you make your money. That's an investment in moving up. I talked to a guy in our YES program about 5 years ago, and I said, "Tell me about your career." He looked young, and he says, "Tom, I came in with a good work ethic, and I was good with people. So I worked on the heat treat floor for a little bit, and they recognized I knew how to motivate people, so they put me in a management arena." And he said, within 3 years of starting, I went from being on the shop floor to managing 40 people on the shop floor and making good money. And so it just really depends. If you just want to wake up every day and go to work and push in parts in and out, you can make a decent living, but it's imperative that you really look at your opportunities within the heat treat field. And I'll wait till the end to tell you what I would tell anybody looking in the industry how to progress. So when we get to that moment, I'll share that piece of advice. But everybody cannot be the Mark Zuckerbergs and the Bill Gates and the techie people.
There's very seldom people that can actually do it.
When someone realizes that they have to do something else, that's the group of people that then turn around and say, okay, what's my other options? Well, maybe a heat treat plant. I like to tinker. I like to put stuff together. Maybe a heat treat plant suffices for that.
And now, what's your approach, or what would be the advice you will give to the listeners about retaining people? I mean, the culture right now is that I don't want to say the millennials, because I believe it's wider than that, but they'll go in and they don't have the patience to be like you're saying, 3 years on a shop, or not on a manager position, let's say on an engineering position, and wait 3 years until they become a manager, which I believe that's very, very good timing. I mean, if you can climb the ladder in 3 years, that's very good timing. But I don't think the generations right now have that patience. they want to climb up the ladder really, really quick. And I'm talking maybe 6 months to a year.
Well, here's the thing that people listening need to figure out. So knowing that people do not walk away from their jobs or their company, they walk away from their boss. It's imperative that people train their managers in some level of management training. MTI has a phenomenal 12-part series on our online academy that does that, but that you train them at some level about how to deal with conflict resolution, how to get the most out of people, how to deal with different personality sets, how to be a leader. I mean, here's a big key thing that came from a book many years ago, that just because you're a great furnace operator does not mean you know how to manage the people that operate the furnace. So there's a different skill set for managing. So making sure your managers have great skill sets to do that. And then training your people well-rounded in your plant to do different work. I had a guy ask me, Tom, should I have my furnace operator take your course in blueprints? I'm like, yeah, you should take blueprints, because at some point in time, he might come across blueprints and he would know how to read them instantaneously instead of having to pawn it off to somebody. So having a well-rounded mind of training, and then create a dynamic workplace to where people want to come to work every day. And that boils down to being flexible. The new generation of workers, at least in the States, is they don't want to work 45 hours for one company. A lot of people want to have a side hustle. So I asked somebody the other day, would you rather have 40 people working 25 hours a week that love coming to work every day? Or would you rather have 15 working 45 that they're really stressed out and strained? And you just got to make that choice. So what I would tell, and here's the great thing about the Metal Treating Institute, about the metal treating industry, heat treating industry, is people don't sell the purpose-driven that we have enough. When you're talking to a worker, we're about to launch a site at our fall meeting in October called heattreatcareers.com. The sole purpose of that website is to help people, help heat treaters have a tool to point people to that can explain, why would you want to work in the heat treating industry? What is the impact of heat treating on general society? And what is heat treating? We got a great video about to come out of production on September 8th that in 5 minutes tells you, what is heat treating? What does it do? Because here's the thing we don't tell people when we're hiring them. Do you realize that when you touch many parts in our shop, those parts are going to lift 180 people thousands of times a day in an airplane and get them safely from point A to point B? You realize that the brakes the pieces that you're heat treating helps protect our country, whatever country you're in. Do you realize that what you're heat treating does this? They're not explaining, because when you understand that purpose behind it, all of a sudden it's like, man, that's an awesome industry. Heat treating makes America, Mexico, it makes the world go, because everything we touch every day, guess what it had to be touched by? A heat treater. And that's where we're failing, is not putting purpose behind what we do. We're just trying to hire someone to do a job instead of telling them, what is that? I got one of our members is very innovative in this area. He takes a photograph of every part that comes in, and in the memo line, he puts what that part's going to be used for, so that every single employee can see what that part is used for. And that is such a phenomenal thing for me, because when you look at it, it just looks like a squiggly line. But when you look at it, it's like, oh, that's the intercocking unit for an M16 rifle. That's awesome. I didn't know that. So they go home amazed every day at the things that they're heat treating. They got things to talk about, with their friends, their family, to astound them with the things that they touch.
I can relate to that story. I don't recall if it's in the Bible or where I read it, maybe on a novel, but there was this architect in the ancient world, right? And there was a guy laying bricks, right? And the architect asked him, "Do you know what you're doing?" And the worker says, I'm laying some bricks. Okay, he goes to the next one. Said, "Do you know what you're doing?" He said, "I'm building a wall." Right? He goes to the third one. "Do you know what you're doing?" "I'm building a cathedral." Right? So yeah. I believe that's what we need to show, like the guy that you were saying. So I think that's the right approach, Tom. Tom, it's been fantastic talking to you and sharing all these challenges, getting your opinion, because you're very well connected. You speak to a bunch of people regarding the industry. You speak to a bunch of experts, and that you tell them to focus on the industry to give talks. So you're very well informed. You know the challenges, you know the drills, you know the guys. And thanks for sharing that. Means the world to me. Thanks for being here. Just before we will finish the show, what's your personal advice or a personal experience you would like to share with the new generation of heat treaters, to the guys that are deciding to take a job in the heat treat department, to the guys that just got transferred to the heat treat department because somebody quit and they just got stuck with that? What can you tell those guys to be as passionate as you are in our industry, which is the metal trading industry?
I heard this from one of our other members tell to a group of the Yes students one time. I think it sits so well. He said, you know what? I had a chance at a young age to go work at Apple, and I had a couple offers from other big groups. And he said, you know what? That would make me a small fish in a giant pond. And he said, then I started thinking through, well, the heat treating industry, it's big, but it's not that big. But if you are young and got a good work ethic and are willing to learn, here's the thing. You have the incredible opportunity of being a big fish in a small pond. And in that small pond, people make really good money and have really good careers. I'm never amazed when I talk to somebody and I say, how long you worked here? And they go, 20 years. I'm like, you don't look old enough to be here 20 years. He said, well, I started when I was 20 and I've been here. I'm 40 years old, been here 20 years. I got 3 kids. I've built a great life here, and I'm gonna be here till I retire. I talked to a guy not too long ago that been at their plant. He's gonna retire. Been there 49 years, Carlos. And when I always go back to heat treating is not this giant. It's this $27 billion industry just in the States and Canada. So it's probably 100 billion in all over the world. But when you're looking for a job, I always go back to, you can go to an industry where you can be a small fish in a big pond, which you just don't make a lot of headway, or you can be a big fish in a small pond, and heat treating is that small pond that you can make good money and a good career. So, in the industry, and remember what I said earlier, everything has to be heat treated if it's got metal in it. Everything. That means that's good job security for most industries.
Thank you so much, Tom. This has been Tom Morrison, CEO of the Metal Trading Institute. Great advice, great wisdom, technical knowledge that he's been sharing with the audience. Thank you so much, Tom. Just would like to thank you and remind our audience that we're uploading weekly podcasts with the power players of the industry, like Tom Morrison, CEO of the Metal Trading Institute. Just, Tom, help me go like this. Please subscribe to the channel.
Right here.
Hit like click. And whenever I get my YouTube check, I'm going to share it out with all the guests that we're having. And then you're saying in this small pound, I don't think I'm going to get ever my YouTube check, but I'm just doing this for fun. Thank you so much, Tom. Have a great day, and hopefully I see you soon.